Ayana Nightwing's fingers clawed at the rocky ground as she dragged herself another agonizing foot toward the muddy creek, her useless legs trailing behind her like broken branches. Blood seeped through the crude bandages wrapped around the stumps where her calves had once been, torn away by the mountain lion that had ended her life as a warrior 3 days ago. The Apache war party had left her here to die with honor rather than live with shame. Such was the way when a warrior could no longer fight, could no longer contribute to the tribe's survival. Her own brother, Chaton, had been the one to place the ceremonial knife beside her before riding away without looking back. "Water," she gasped in Apache, her throat raw from calling out to spirits that no longer seemed to hear her prayers. The creek bubbled mockingly just beyond her reach. Clear and cool in the harsh Arizona Territory sun of 1879, a shadow fell across her face, and she looked up, expecting to see buzzards circling. Instead, she found herself staring into the most unusual eyes she'd ever seen, one blue as winter sky, one green as spring grass. The face they belonged to was weathered by sun and wind, framed by auburn hair that caught the light like burnished copper. "Jesus Christ," the man breathed, dropping to his knees beside her. His hands hovered over her wounds, careful not to touch without permission. "What happened to you, miss?" Yana tried to speak, but only managed to croak.
"Hey!"
The stranger clearly. A white cowboy by his clothing and manner immediately understood her need. He scooped water from the creek in his cupped palms and held it to her cracked lips. "Easy now," he murmured as she drank greedily. "Not too fast or you'll make yourself sick." When her immediate thirst was quenched, she studied him with eyes black as obsidian, trying to understand why this white man would help an Apache warrior woman left to die. His mismatched eyes held genuine concern, not the hatred or fear she expected. "Gatewood Sinclair," he said, seeming to read her confusion. "I run cattle in the valley below. Found your trail of blood and came looking." He gestured toward her legs with careful respect. "This wasn't an accident, was it?" Cougar Ayana managed in heavily accented English, a language she'd learned from captured settlers before her world changed forever. "3 suns passed. Tribe they leave me. No use anymore." Gatewood's jaw tightened, but not with disgust, with anger at the cruelty of it. No use. He looked at her strong arms, her intelligent eyes, the proud set of her shoulders even in defeat. "Lady, I've seen grown men cry over a broken finger. You've been dragging yourself across desert rock for 3 days with—" He stopped, shaking his head. "You're the strongest person I've ever met." Something in his tone, respect rather than pity, made Ayana's warrior spirit flicker back to life. She had been Stormrunner, the fastest scout in her band, able to cover 50 miles on foot without tiring. She had killed 7 enemy braves in hand-to-hand combat and could shoot an arrow through a silver dollar at 100 paces. But all of that meant nothing now. "I die here," she said simply. "It's a good place. Creek sings death song. It's like hell you're dying here." Gatewood stood and began stripping off his shirt, revealing a torso marked with old scars, bullet wounds, knife cuts. The signs of a man who'd lived hard and survived harder. "I'm taking you back to my ranch. Doc Henley can look at those wounds properly." "Why?" The question came out as a whisper. "I am enemy. Apache. You should leave me." Gatewood paused in tearing his shirt into clean bandages. When he looked at her again, something deep and powerful passed between them, and understanding that transcended the color of their skin or the differences in their worlds. "Because leaving someone to die alone isn't the cowboy way," he said quietly. "And because something tells me you're not done fighting yet, Stormrunner." Her breath caught. He'd used her warrior name, the one her people had stripped from her, along with their protection. Hearing it on his lips was like feeling her heart beat again after being dead. "How you know this name? Your leggings?" He nodded toward the intricate beadwork on her torn clothing, lightning patterned with storm clouds. "Only a few Apache warriors earn the right to wear those symbols. You were somebody important before this happened." As he carefully cleaned and rebandaged her wounds, his touch gentle despite the size and calluses of his hands. Ayana felt something she hadn't experienced since the mountain lion's claws had torn away her legs. Hope. But with hope came fear. What would this cowboy want in return for his kindness? And what would happen when he realized that saving her life meant inheriting an enemy who had nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Said his name carefully, testing how it felt on her tongue. When you see what I was, what I did, you still help? He met her obsidian gaze steadily, his mismatched eyes burning with determination. Try me, Stormrunner. Just try me. Gatewood's ranch house sat in a valley that seemed carved from a different world, lush with cottonwoods and fed by natural springs that turned the harsh desert into an oasis. As he carried Ayanna across the threshold, she marveled at the careful way he navigated the steps, protecting her from any jarring movement that might worsen her injuries. Consuela.
Ow!
He called out in Spanish as they entered. I need hot water and clean linens. Now, a middle-aged Mexican woman emerged from the kitchen, her dark eyes widening as she took in the sight of the wounded Apache woman in her patron's arms. But instead of fear or revulsion, Consuela's weathered face immediately softened with compassion. Adios mio, she breathed, crossing herself. What happened to this poor child? Mountain Lion Gatewood said grimly, carrying Ayanna toward what appeared to be a guest room. 3 days ago, her own people left her to die. Consuela made a sound of disgust that needed no translation. Hombres, she muttered, then switched to English. Men think only broken things have no value. Stupid men. She bustled away, already gathering supplies, as Gatewood gently placed Ayanna on the soft bed, the first bed she'd ever lain, and she couldn't hide her amazement at the simple luxury. Clean white sheets, a pillow that smelled of lavender, walls that would keep out wind and rain. For someone who'd spent her entire life sleeping on the ground or in hide teepees, it was almost overwhelming. Easy, Gatewood soothed, noticing her tension. You're safe here. Consuela's been patching up wounded strays for 20 years. Animal and human. She'll take good care of you. Why you do this? Ayanna asked again, needing to understand. In her world, kindness always came with a price. What you want from Stormrunner. Gatewood sat carefully on the edge of the bed, his mismatched eyes serious. 5 years ago, Apache raiders hit my ranch, killed my cattle, burned my barn, ran off my horses. He saw her stiffen and held up a placating hand. But they also left my wounded foreman alive when they could have killed him. One of your warriors, a woman, stopped to give him water before they rode away. Ayanna's breath caught. Do you remember that raid? Remember the white man lying bleeding in the dirt? She had indeed given him water, against the protests of the other warriors who called her soft. That was you, Gatewood continued, reading the recognition in her eyes. You saved Miguel's life. He described you perfectly, the storm pattern on. Your leggings, those black eyes, the way you moved, like lightning itself. Small debt, Ayanna said dismissively, though her heart was pounding. 1 cup water. Small to you, maybe. Miguel's got 6 children. His wife was pregnant with their 7th when you gave him that drink. Gatewood's voice grew rough with emotion. He lived to see his son born because of your mercy. It's not a small debt, too. Me. Before Ayanna could respond, Consuela returned with Doc Henley, a grizzled old man who'd seen every kind of wound the frontier could inflict. He examined her injuries with professional detachment, though she caught him muttering under his breath about damned waste and strong as a horse. Healing well, considering, he announced finally. Whoever did the initial treatment knew what they were doing. Keep the wounds clean, get some meat on her bones, and she'll live to be 100. After the doctor left, Consuela took over with the fierce protectiveness of a mother hen. She fed Ayanna rich beef broth and cornbread, ignoring all protests about Apache warriors not accepting charity from enemies. Enemies? Nothing, Consuela snorted. You're a woman who's been hurt, and I'm a woman who knows how to heal. The rest is politics for men to worry about. As evening fell, Gatewood returned to check on his unexpected guest, found her sitting up in bed, staring out the window at the stars she'd once used to navigate long-distance raids. Restless? He asked, settling into the chair beside her bed. Strange place, she admitted, soft. Apache sleep under sky, feel wind. This ... she gestured at the walls like cave. Would you prefer to sleep outside? I could set up a bedroll on the porch. Offer, casual as it was, stunned her. No one had asked what she preferred since her injury. The tribe had decided for her death was preferable to dishonor. But this cowboy with the strange eyes actually cared about her comfort. Stars better, she said quietly, within minutes. Gatewood had carried her to the covered porch and arranged blankets on a comfortable bedroll. The relief on her face as she looked up at the familiar constellations was worth every minute of effort. Better, he asked, settling into a nearby chair with his coffee. Yes. She studied his profile in the moonlight. Gatewood Sinclair, you have a woman? Wife? No. Wife. Had a fiancé once, but she decided ranch life was too rough for a Boston lady. There was old pain in his voice, but no bitterness. What about you? Husband waiting somewhere? Ayana's laugh was sharp as a blade. Who take woman with no legs? House. To marry running wolf after next hunt. Now, she shrugged the gesture, eloquent in its hopelessness. Now you're free to choose for yourself, Gatewood said quietly. This might be the best thing that ever happened to you. She turned to stare at him, wondering if he was mocking her. But his expression was sincere, and she realized he truly saw her situation differently than anyone else ever had. You strange white man, she said finally. See broken thing, think it beautiful. I don't see a broken thing, Gatewood replied, his voice low and intense. I see a survivor, a fighter, a woman strong enough to drag herself across the desert when lesser people would have given up and died. Something shifted between them in that moment, a recognition that went deeper than gratitude or obligation. For the first time since her injury, Ayana felt like more than just a collection of wounds and limitations. She felt like a woman. A week later, Ayana had transformed Gatewood's ranch into something resembling a military camp. Using techniques learned from years of warfare, she'd identified every possible approach to the property, cataloged the defensive advantages of each building, and begun fashioning weapons from whatever materials she could find. What exactly are you doing? Gatewood asked, finding her on the porch carefully sharpening a kitchen knife on a whetstone. Making ready, she replied without looking up from her work. You help Apache warrior woman. Now Apache warrior woman protect you. From what? She paused in her sharpening to fix him with those obsidian eyes. From my brother, Chayton Nightwing leads war party. You find out you take me, he come, kill you, burn ranch, steal horses. His way. Gatewood's jaw tightened. Let him come. This is my land, and you're under my protection. One man against 20 warriors. Ayana shook her head. You brave but not smart, need plan. She was right, and they both knew it. Word would eventually reach her tribe that she'd survived, and when it did, Chatton would view her rescue as theft of Apache property, or worse, as an insult to their decision to let her die with honor. What kind of plan? Gatewood asked, settling beside her on the porch steps. Ayana's smile was sharp as the blade she held. Use their beliefs against them. Apache think woman with no legs is curse bad spirit. But what if curse become blessing? What if spirits speak through broken warrior woman? Tell tribe new path. You're talking about setting yourself up as some kind of medicine woman. Already am, she said simply. Before mountain lion, I have dreams. Visions of white buffalo, speaking birds, changes coming to desert. Schmental Bear said, I have gift. Now maybe gift have purpose. Gatewood studied her profile, noting the way moonlight caught the proud angles of her cheekbones, the determined set of her jaw. Even sitting still, she radiated the contained energy of a predator waiting to strike. It's dangerous, he said finally. If they don't believe you, ... then we fight. She tested the knife's edge against her thumb, drawing a thin line of blood. Better to die fighting than live as burden. Over the next few days, Ayana began preparing for her brother's inevitable arrival. She taught Gatewood Apache fighting techniques that could be adapted for close-quarters combat, showed him how to read the landscape for signs of approaching riders, and most importantly, helped him understand the complex honor codes that governed her people's behavior. Apache respects strength above all, she explained as they practiced knife fighting in the barn. But not just strength of body, strength of spirit, of will. When Chatan come, he test you, see if you're worthy of keeping what you claim. And what am I claiming exactly? Gatewood asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Ayana paused in her demonstration, the wooden practice blade trembling slightly in her grip. You claim me as protector, as... She struggled for the English words. as man who choose woman, not have woman chosen for him. The admission hung between them like a charged storm cloud. They'd been dancing around their growing attraction for days, both aware that something powerful was building, but neither willing to name it directly. Ayanna Gatewood said carefully, "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" She lifted her chin with characteristic defiance. "I say, Apache warrior woman, choose her own path. Choose a man who see her as more than broken thing. If that man want her..." She let the sentence hang unfinished. Gatewood dropped his practice weapon and closed the distance between them in 2 quick strides. His hands framed her face with infinite gentleness, his mismatched eyes searching hers for any sign of doubt. "I want you," he said simply, "not out of pity or obligation. I want the fierce, brilliant, impossible woman who's turned my quiet ranch into a fortress and made me feel alive again for the first time in years." When he kissed her, it was with all the hunger and tenderness that had been building between them. Ayanna responded with equal passion, her arms coming up to circle his neck as she poured all her newfound hope and desperate love into the contact. They broke apart, breathing hard, foreheads touching as they tried to process what had just changed between them. "This complicates everything," Gatewood said against her lips. "Good," Ayanna replied fiercely. "Apache way, Cowboy way, both say woman is prize to be won or burden to be carried. This way is Ayanna way. I choose you, you choose me. Equal." Gatewood could respond. The sound of approaching horses echoed across the valley. Consuela's voice called out from the house in rapid Spanish riders coming, many of them armed and painted for war. "Chatan," Ayanna breathed, her face going pale but determined. "He comes sooner than expected." Gatewood helped her toward the house, his mind racing through their defensive plans. "Are you ready for this?" Ayanna's smile was warrior bright and utterly fearless. "All my life I prepare for battle. This just different kind of war." As they took their positions, Ayanna on the porch where she could be clearly seen, Gatewood standing protectively beside her with his rifle ready, 20 Apache warriors crested the hill overlooking the ranch. At their head rode a man who was clearly Ayanna's brother, his face painted with symbols of mourning and rage. "Stormrunner," Chatan called out in Apache, his voice carrying clearly across the valley. "You shame our family by refusing to die with honor. Turn to face judgment, or watch this white dog burn for his interference." Ayanna straightened in her chair, every inch the warrior princess despite her disabilities. When she spoke, her voice rang with authority and power that made even the horses prick up their ears. "I am no longer Stormrunner," she declared. "I am Vision Speaker, chosen by spirits to bring new truth to our people. And this man is under my protection." The challenge had been issued. Now they would discover whether love and courage were enough to overcome tradition and prejudice, or if their story would end in blood and fire. Chatan Nightwing dismounted slowly, his paint-streaked face twisted with a mixture of grief and fury. Behind him, 19 warriors remained mounted, their weapons ready but not yet raised. They were here for justice, not massacre, at least until their leader decided otherwise. "You speak of visions and spirits, sister," Chatan said in Apache, his voice carrying across the tense silence. "But I see only a broken woman who clings to life without honor. The mountain lion marked you as unworthy. Accept your fate." Ayanna felt Gatewood's hand rest gently on her shoulder, possessive or protective, but supportive, giving her strength without diminishing her authority. She drew that strength into herself and let it fuel the power in her voice. "The mountain lion was sent to break my body, yes," she replied in the same language, knowing Gatewood couldn't understand but trusting him to follow her lead. "But spirits do not always speak in ways we expect." And my legs were taken so my eyes could truly see. She paused, letting her gaze sweep over the assembled warriors, noting which ones shifted uncomfortably at her words. Several were young, untested, and more susceptible to believing in spiritual mysteries. 3 nights ago, White Buffalo Woman came to me in dreams," Ayanna continued, her voice taking on the rhythmic cadence of a sacred storytelling. "She showed me rivers of blood flowing from our lands, our children scattered like leaves in winter wind. She showed me the choice before you add or die, bend or break." "Lies," Chatan spat, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. Ayanna had always been touched by visions, even as a child. You speak false prophecies to save your white lover? The accusation hit its mark, and Ayanna felt heat rise in her cheeks. But instead of denying it, she lifted her chin proudly. Yes, I have chosen this man, she said simply, as he has chosen me. Not because I am weak and need protection, but because together we are stronger than apart. This too was shown in the visions. She switched to English then, her words meant. For both audiences, Gatewood Sinclair, speak truth to my brother. Tell him why you help Apache woman who should be your enemy. Gatewood stepped forward slightly, his rifle lowered but ready. When he spoke, his voice was calm and respectful, though his mismatched eyes never left Chatton's face. 'Cause 5 years ago, an Apache warrior woman gave mercy to my wounded friend. When she could have let him die, he said, because strength deserves respect, no matter what form it takes. And because your sister has more courage in her smallest finger than most men have in their whole bodies. One of the younger warriors translated quietly for those who didn't speak English. Ayanna caught the word mercy and saw several faces change expression. Mercy was not weakness in Apache. Culture, it was the mark of a great warrior, one secure, enough in their power to show restraint. You claim vision, Shaitan said, returning to Apache. Prove it. Me something only spirits would know. Ayanna's heart pounded, but she had expected this test. She had indeed been having dreams, vivid, disturbing visions that had begun even before her injury. Now she gambled everything on their truth. You dream of running elk, she said quietly. Our father comes to you in sleep, speaks of changes coming like storm clouds. He tells you the old ways are dying, that we must find new path or watch our people disappear like morning mist. Chaitin's face went white beneath his war paint. Running Elk had died in battle 3 years ago, and he had never spoken of his dreams. To anyone, not even to his wife or closest friends. How? He whispered. Because spirits speak to those who listen, Ayanna replied. And because pain opens doors that comfort keeps closed. My broken body became doorway for sacred knowledge. She gestured toward the ranch around them, where Mexican, Apache, and Anglo influences blended in peaceful coexistence. Look at this place, brother. A white man, Mexican woman, Apache warrior, finding way to live together, as his future white buffalo woman showed me. Not surrender, not defeat, adaptation. The warriors were murmuring among themselves now, and Ayanna could sense the shift in their mood. Fear was giving way to curiosity, hostility to cautious respect. Even if spirits speak through you, Chaitin said desperately, you still broke sacred law. Apache warrior cannot live with shame. What shame? Ayanna's voice cracked like a whip. I faced mountain lion in single combat. I survived wounds that would kill most men. I dragged myself across desert for 3 days with no help. No water, no hope, except the strength in my own spirit. Where is the shame in surviving? Where is the dishonor in refusing to die? She pulled herself higher in her chair, her obsidian eyes blazing with inner fire. You want to speak of shame? The shame is in abandoning family. The shame is in calling strength weakness, because it looks different than you expected. Fell over the group like a blanket. Even the horses seemed to sense the momentous nature of this confrontation, a clash, not just between individuals, but between old ways and new possibilities. Finally, one of the older warriors spoke up. If she speaks truth about visions, we must listen. Spirits choose their own messengers. Test me, Ayanna said boldly. Give me challenge that proves whether spirits truly speak through me. But no, this whatever test you choose, Gatewood Sinclair, stands with me, we face it together, or not at all. Chaitin looked between his sister and the cowboy who had claimed her, noting the way they stood united without either dominating the other. It was unlike any partnership he had ever seen, not the traditional pattern of protector and protected, but something altogether new. Very well, he said finally, but if you fail this test, both of you die. The spirits will judge whether your new way has merit or whether it is simply the delusion of a broken woman and her foolish lover. Gatewood squeezed Ayanna's shoulder, gently. Whatever it is, he murmured in English, we'll face it together." She reached up to cover his hand with hers, drawing strength from his unwavering support. "Together," she agreed, then looked back at her brother. "Name your test, Chiton Nightwing. Let the spirits decide our fate." "The test is this," Chiton announced, his voice carrying the weight of tribal law. "Tomorrow at sunrise, you will attempt the trial of the sacred spring. If your visions are true, if spirits truly speak through you, then the ancient guardian will recognize your medicine and allow you to drink from waters that have been forbidden to our people for 3 generations. Ayana's blood turned to ice. The sacred spring lay hidden deep in Skeleton Canyon, protected by a creature that Apache legends claimed was part spirit, part flesh, a massive grizzly bear marked with symbols that glowed like fire in moonlight. 3 warriors had attempted to reach the spring in her lifetime. None had returned alive. "You ask her to face the guardian bear with no legs, no way to run?" Gatewood demanded, his protective instincts overriding diplomacy.
"That's not a test, it's execution."
"If she is truly chosen by spirits, the guardian will not harm her," Chiton replied coldly. "If she is not," shrugged, the gesture speaking volumes about his expectations. "Then I go with her," Gatewood said firmly. Partners face challenges. Together, no. Chayton's refusal was absolute. It's his test of Apache vision, Apache medicine. White man cannot stand between spiritual messenger and sacred judgment. Ayana felt panic clawing at her chest, but she forced it down. She had committed to this path when she'd claimed to be a vision speaker. Now she had to see it through, no matter the cost. "I accept," she said quietly, earning sharp looks from both men. "But I ask one night to prepare, to seek guidance from spirits before facing their guardian." Chayton nodded grudgingly. "Sunrise tomorrow? Come alone to the canyon mouth? We will be waiting." After the war party departed, Gatewood paced. The porch like a caged wolf, his anger and fear radiating from him in waves. "There has to be another way," he said for the 10th time. "Some trick, some strategy we haven't considered." "No trick will fool ancient guardian," Ayana replied calmly, though her hands shook as she sharpened her knife. "This creature is not ordinary bear. It knows truth from lie, medicine from pretense." "Then we run. Tonight, head for the territorial capital, find the military, and prove Chayton right." Ayana's voice was sharp. "Prove that I am broken woman hiding behind white man's protection? No, I face this test, or I am nothing." Gatewood knelt beside her chair, his mismatched eyes burning with desperate intensity. "You're everything," he said roughly. "You're the strongest, bravest, most magnificent woman I've ever known. I don't care what some mythical bear thinks, you're perfect exactly as you are." His words washed over her like healing balm, giving her strength she didn't. No, she possessed. But they also made the prospect of losing him, of dying tomorrow, and leaving him alone, that much more painful. "Gatewood," she whispered, cupping his face in her hands. "If tomorrow I die, promise me something." "You're not going to die." "Promise," she insisted. "Find good woman, have children, fill this valley with laughter and love. Do not let my death make you afraid to live." Instead of promising, Gatewood pulled her into his arms and carried her into the house, past Consuela's. Knowing smile, into the bedroom they had been sharing for the past 3 nights. There with infinite tenderness and desperate passion. They made love as if it were their last night on earth, which it very well might be. Later, as Gatewood slept, beside her, Ayana slipped quietly from the bed and made her way to the porch. Under the star-bright sky, she began the rituals her grandmother had taught her. Preparing her spirit for whatever tomorrow would bring, she painted her face with sacred symbols using clay and berries, braided eagle feathers into her hair, and sang the ancient songs that connected her to the spirits of her ancestors. As dawn approached, she felt a strange peace settle over her, not resignation, but acceptance of whatever fate awaited. Gatewood found her there as the first light touched. The mountains, fully prepared and radiating quiet dignity. "You look like a queen," he said softly, taking in her ceremonial appearance. "Whatever happens today, I want you to know, loving you has been the greatest privilege of my life. And loving you has taught me what it means to be truly chosen. she replied, "not by spirits or visions, but by heart that sees value where others see only brokenness." He helped her onto the specially modified saddle he'd created for her, ensuring she could ride safely despite her limitations. The journey to Skeleton Canyon took 2 hours, Chayton's warriors following at a respectful distance. At the canyon mouth, Gatewood had to dismount and step back, his face etched with barely controlled anguish as Ayanna continued alone into the narrow passage that led to the sacred spring. The canyon walls rose around her like cathedral spires, covered with ancient petroglyphs that seemed to watch her passage with stone eyes. The silence was absolute, except for her horse's hoofbeats echoing off the rock faces. Then she saw it. The sacred spring bubbled up from a pool of crystal-clear water surrounded by stone formations that looked almost deliberately arranged. And lying beside the pool, massive beyond belief, is the guardian bear. Its fur was silver-white, marked with symbols that did indeed seem to glow with their own inner light. When it raised its head at her approach, she saw eyes that held intelligence far beyond any normal animal ancient, knowing filled with the wisdom of centuries. This was no ordinary creature. This was something far older and more powerful than she had imagined. The bear rose to its full height, nearly 10 feet tall, and studied her with those impossibly knowing eyes. Ayanna felt every instinct screaming at her to flee, but she forced herself to remain still and meet the creature's gaze directly. "I am Vision's speaker," she said in the ancient Apache tongue, her voice steady despite her fear. "I come seeking truth, not water, judgment, not blessing. Show me whether I am chosen or merely deluded." The guardian bear stepped toward her, each footfall shaking the ground like thunder. The guardian bear approached with deliberate slowness, each massive paw falling silent on the ancient stone despite its enormous size. Ayanna's horse trembled beneath her but didn't bolt even. The animal seemed to sense that running would mean death, while standing still might mean something else entirely. When the creature was close enough that she could see the individual, silver hairs gleaming in its ethereal markings, it stopped and lowered its great head until they were eye to eye. The intelligence there was overwhelming, older than the mountains, deeper than the canyon walls, carrying the accumulated wisdom of countless generations. Then, impossibly, it spoke, not with words, but directly into her mind, its voice like distant thunder mixed with the whisper of wind through sacred caves. "Child of two worlds," the present said, "you come seeking validation for choices already made. But truth cannot be given, only discovered. Show me your heart, daughter of storm and sky." Without conscious thought, Ayanna's hands moved to her chest, pulling aside the leather of her shirt to reveal the terrible scars left by the mountain lion. But alongside the claw marks, painted in sacred clay, were the symbols of her new understanding: storm clouds giving way to sunrise, broken arrows transforming into growing corn, the ancient pictograph for change surrounded by signs of hope. With Stormrunner, she communicated back, somehow understanding that thoughts were the proper language here. "I believed strength meant only the power to destroy, to conquer, to move faster and strike harder than any enemy. The mountain lion broke my legs but opened my eyes. Now I see that true strength is the courage to transform, to become something new when the old ways no longer serve." The guardian bear studied the symbols on her body, then moved closer still, its massive head tilting as if listening to something only it could hear. When it looked at her again, was something almost like approval in those ancient eyes. "And the white warrior who claims you as his own?" the presence asked. "What wisdom has he brought to your transformation?" Images flooded Ayanna's mind, Gatewoods, gentle hands cleaning her wounds, his respectful questions about her needs. The way he stood beside her as an equal partner rather than trying to dominate or protect from above. Most importantly, she saw herself through his eyes, not broken or diminished, but powerful in ways she had never imagined. "He sees strength where others see weakness," she replied.
Why?
"He values wisdom over speed, courage over conquest. We are more than either could be alone." The bear moved around her horse in a slow circle, its massive form somehow graceful, despite its size. As it walked, The glowing symbols on its fur seemed to shift and change, telling stories in ancient pictographs to lies of adaptation, survival. The eternal dance between tradition and necessary change. The old ways served their purpose. The guardian spoke as it completed its circuit. But seasons turn, and even mountains must eventually bow to wind and water. Your brother leads with the courage of yesterday. You offer the wisdom of tomorrow suddenly. The bear's great head swung toward the canyon entrance, where Ayana knew Chaitan and his warriors waited. Something like amusement flickered in its ancient eyes. Your test is complete, Vision Speaker. But another begins now. The sound of approaching horses echoed off the canyon walls. Ayana's heart sank as she recognized the rhythm, not Apache ponies, but shod hooves, moving at a gallop. White soldiers riding hard toward the canyon mouth, where her brother's war party waited in the open. Gatewood, she breathed, understanding immediately. Someone had reported the Apache presence to the territorial authorities. And now a tragedy was about to unfold that would destroy any hope of peace between the peoples. The Guardian. Bear looked at her expectantly, and she realized this was her real test, not surviving the creature's judgment, but preventing the bloodshed that would soon paint these sacred rocks red. Can you stop what comes? The ancient presence asked. Can you bridge the gap between worlds before fear and hatred claim more lives? Without hesitation, Ayana urged her horse toward the canyon entrance, the guardian bear pacing beside her like some impossible honor guard. As they emerged from the canyon's mouth, she saw the disaster unfolding exactly as she'd feared. 20 Apache warriors sat their horses in battle formation, weapons ready, facing 30 U.S. cavalry soldiers who had taken defensive positions behind rocks and scrub brush. At the head of the soldiers rode Captain Morrison, a man she recognized from wanted posters. Known for his brutal efficiency in Indian removal operations, Gatewood stood between the two forces, his hands raised peacefully, trying desperately to prevent the massacre that seemed inevitable. But tension crackled in the air like lightning before a storm, and she could see several young warriors fingering their rifles, while cavalry troopers adjusted their grips on their weapons. Stand down, civilians, Captain Morrison barked at Gatewood. We have reports of Apache raiders terrorizing local ranchers. These savages will be dealt with according to military justice. They're not raiders, Gatewood protested. They came here for a tribal ceremony. No one's been harmed or threatened. The only good Indian is a dead Indian, Morrison replied coldly, raising his hand to signal the attack. Men, prepare to stop. Ayana's voice rang across the canyon with such authority that every man present, Apache and cavalry alike, to stare what they saw defied comprehension. An Apache woman riding out of the sacred canyon, flanked by a creature that shouldn't exist. Her face painted with symbols that seemed to glow in the morning light. The guardian bear's presence was so overwhelming, so fundamentally other, that several horses reared in terror while their riders fought to maintain control. The great creature's silver fur caught the sunlight, making the glowing markings on its hide clearly visible to all present. I am Vision Speaker, Ayana announced, her voice carrying clearly across the desert air. I speak for spirits who guard this sacred place. And I tell you, the Seni blood spilled here today will bring curse upon both peoples that will last 7 generations. Captain Morrison's face went pale, but his military training overrode his superstitious fears. I don't care what kind of trick this is, he snarled, though his voice shook slightly. That's just a trained bear and an Indian witch. Men, take aim. Before anyone could fire, the guardian bear rose to its full height and roared a sound that shook the very mountains and sent every horse within a mile into panicked flight. In that moment of chaos, Ayana saw her chance. Chaitan. She called in Apache. Tell your warriors to put down their weapons. Trust your sister's vision one more time. Ask us to surrender to these soldiers, her brother replied, his voice tight with wounded pride. I ask you to show strength that surpasses warfare, she shot back, the courage to choose a different path. One by one, with visible reluctance, the Apache warriors lowered their rifles. The gesture was not surrender, but something more powerful. Choice to trust in possibility rather than prepare for death. Captain Morrison, seeing the Indians backing down, grew bolder. That's more like it. Now dismount and prepare to be the guardian bear's second roar. Cut him off mid-sentence. This one's somehow even more terrifying than the first. The ancient creature began walking directly toward the cavalry line. It's glowing, symbols pulsing with increasing intensity. "Sir," one of the soldiers whispered, his voice cracking with fear, "maybe we should listen to what she has to say." Ayanna seized the moment, guiding her horse to a position where both groups could see her clearly. The guardian bear positioned itself behind her like a living mountain, its presence lending weight to every word she spoke. "I have stood in presence of spirits older than your nations," she said, switching between English and Apache so all could understand. "I have seen visions of what comes if we continue on path of blood and hatred. Our children will inherit desert of bones, rivers that run red with endless war." She gestured toward Gatewood, who stood watching with naked admiration and love. "But I have also seen different future. White rancher and Apache woman, Mexican cook and Irish cowboys. All peoples learning to share this vast land instead of fighting. Over its bones? Impossible," Captain Morrison scoffed, though he kept glancing nervously at the guardian bear. "Oil and water don't mix, and neither do civilized folks and savages." "Then let us prove you wrong," Ayanna said simply. "Give us 1 year. Let Apache warriors work alongside white ranchers. Let us show that peace brings more profit than war, that cooperation builds more than conquest destroys." Chaitan urged his horse forward, his face a mask of conflicted emotions. "Sister, you ask our people to abandon everything our fathers fought for." "I ask our people to fight for something better than what our fathers could imagine," she replied. "The Guardian has shown me truth we can adapt and thrive, or cling to old ways and die." "Which future do you choose for your children?" The silence, stretched taut as bowstring, broken only by the guardian bear's deep, rumbling breaths. Finally, one of the younger Apache warriors spoke up. "If Vision Speaker's medicine is strong enough to tame Sacred Guardian, perhaps her other visions also carry truth." More voices joined in agreement, both Apache and cavalrymen beginning to see possibility where moments before they had seen only inevitable bloodshed. Captain Morrison, outnumbered and unnerved by the supernatural presence looming behind the Indian woman, finally lowered his weapon. 1 year, he said grudgingly. "But any raids, any violence, any broken treaties, and we finish this conversation with bullets instead of words." As the tension began to diffuse and both groups started the delicate process of negotiation, Ayanna felt the guardian bear's presence begin to fade. She turned to see the ancient creature backing toward the canyon entrance, its glowing symbols dimming as it prepared to return to its eternal vigil. "Well done, daughter of storms," the voice whispered in her mind one final time. "You have passed the only test that truly matters, the courage to choose hope over fear, bridge building over wall building. Your medicine is strong." The guardian bear vanished into the canyon shadows, leaving behind only the faintest glimmer of silver light and the lingering sense that something profound had just changed in the relationship between worlds. 1 year later, the Sinclair Ranch had transformed into something unprecedented in the Arizona Territory, a thriving community where Apache, Mexican, and Anglo families worked side by side, their children playing together while their parents built a new kind of frontier society. Ayanna sat on the expanded porch of what was now called the Vision Speaker's house, watching her husband direct the construction of a new barn with the help of her brother, Chatan, and 2 former cavalry soldiers who had requested discharge to join their experiment in peaceful coexistence. Her legs still ended at the knees. Gatewood had crafted her a wheeled chair that allowed her to move freely around the property. More importantly, her role as mediator and spiritual guide had given her a purpose that transcended physical limitations. Disputes between the various groups were brought to her for resolution, and her reputation for wisdom and fairness had spread throughout the territory. "The territorial governor arrives tomorrow," Consuela announced, emerging from the house with a basket of fresh bread. "Are you ready for his inspection?" Ayanna smiled, one hand moving unconsciously to rest on the gentle swell of her belly. 5 months, along with the child, that would seal the union between worlds that she and Gatewood had created. As ready as we can be, the success speaks for itself. And it did. What had started as a desperate gamble to prevent bloodshed had evolved into a model community that was being studied by politicians and military leaders across the Western territories. Crime was virtually non-existent. Agricultural production had increased dramatically through the combination of Apache environmental knowledge and Anglo farming techniques. And most remarkably, there had been no violent incidents between ethnic groups in the entire year. "Still can't believe it worked," said Miguel Santos, Gatewood's former foreman who now served as the community's unofficial mayor. "When you first proposed this crazy idea, I thought we'd all be dead within a month." "Faith has power," Ayanna replied simply. "When people believe in something better than what they have, they find ways to make it real." Gatewood appeared around the corner of the barn, his shirt stained with sweat and sawdust, his mismatched eyes bright with satisfaction at a job well done. At 35, he had grown into his role as community leader with natural grace, respected by men who had once been enemies. "How are my girls doing?" he asked, kneeling beside Ayanna's chair to place a gentle hand on her belly. "Your daughter is active today," she laughed, capturing his hand as the baby kicked. "Oh, I think she will be warrior like her mother. Oh, God help us all." Gatewood grinned, leaning in to kiss his wife with the casual intimacy of a couple, completely secure in their love. One vision speaker in the family is probably all the territory can handle. Their peaceful moment was interrupted by the arrival of a familiar figure, Captain Morrison. Now Colonel Morrison, riding up the path with a small escort. The man who had once threatened massacre now served as military liaison to their experimental community. His initial skepticism transformed into grudging respect and eventually genuine admiration. "Mrs. Sinclair," he said formally, dismounting and removing his hat in a gesture that would have been unthinkable a year ago. "A U.S. Army officer showing respect to an Apache woman. I bring word from Washington. The President himself has taken notice of your success here." Ayanna exchanged glances with Gatewood, both remembering the day when this same man had been ready to kill every Apache in sight. "What kind of notice?" "The good kind," Morrison replied with what might have been a smile. "Congress is considering legislation to establish similar communities throughout the territories. They're calling it the Vision Speaker Protocol, a new approach to Indian relations based on cooperation rather than conquest. And the military supports this?" Gatewood asked, though he already knew the answer from Morrison's demeanor. "The military supports whatever keeps the peace and saves lives," the colonel replied pragmatically. "Your way has proven more effective than decades of warfare. Results speak louder than prejudice." As evening fell, and the various community members gathered for their traditional weekly fiesta, custom that had grown organically from Ayanna's insistence that sharing food builds stronger bonds than sharing conflict, she reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them all to this moment. Chaitan sat with his white neighbor discussing irrigation techniques while their children played together in the gathering dusk. Former enemies now worked as partners, their initial suspicion replaced by mutual respect and genuine friendship. The experiment that had begun as a desperate gamble to save lives had evolved into something far greater. Glimpse of what America could become if its people chose cooperation over conquest. "Any regrets?" Gatewood asked quietly as they prepared for bed, the sounds of their thriving community settling into peaceful evening rhythms around them. Ayanna looked out the window at the lights, flickering in houses where families of different cultures were tucking their children into bed, all of them part of something larger than the sum of their individual dreams. Then she looked at her husband, the man whose courage and compassion made all of this possible, and felt her heart overflow with gratitude. "Only one," she said with a mischievous smile that reminded him of the fierce warrior woman who had stumbled into his barn so long ago. "I regret that it took a mountain lion attack to teach me the most important truth of all, which is that sometimes we must be broken before we can become whole. Sometimes we must lose everything we think we are before we can discover who we're meant to be." She took his hand and placed it over their unborn child. "Sometimes the greatest strength comes from learning when not to fight." Outside their window, the desert stretched away toward, mountains painted silver by moonlight, the same landscape that had once seemed so harsh and unforgiving, now transformed into a homeland where different peoples could build a shared future. It was a victory more complete than any she had ever won in battle. A triumph of hope over fear that would echo through generations yet unborn. In the distance, barely visible against the canyon walls, a silver shape moved through the shadows, the guardian bear making its eternal rounds, watching over the sacred places and the changes that had come to pass. The ancient creature paused, seeming to look directly at their house, and in that moment, Ayanna felt its approval like a benediction. "Well done, daughter of storms," the familiar voice whispered in her mind one last time. "You have built bridges where others saw only chasms. Your children will inherit a world shaped by wisdom rather than warfare." As she drifted off to sleep in her husband's arms, surrounded by the sounds of a community at peace, Ayanna knew that her greatest adventure was just beginning. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that love could triumph over hatred, that understanding could overcome prejudice, that sometimes the most profound victories were won not through conquest, but through the courage to transform. The Apache warrior woman who had once measured her worth by her ability to run swift and strike hard had discovered something far more powerful: the strength to build rather than destroy, to heal rather than harm, and to create a legacy that would outlast any battlefield triumph. She had found her true purpose at last, and it was beautiful.